now it's the afternoon, you know? So I'm feeling like I need to sit and just chill. So can you guys hear me? Is the mic even good? Good? Okay. I feel like we're friends now. I got that first one out of the way. Can you see my dress? What am I doing with the stool? Okay, thank you so much. See, we need each other. Okay, I'm excited about this topic. Every session that I have today, I talk about books because I feel like there's a lot of things in my homeschooling journey and my motherhood journey that guys, I'm so sorry. I feel like will you just turn it? I'm so high maintenance. That I question, or I'm like, am I doing this right? Like, or I'll pivot. But there's been one anchor that I feel like, I think I nailed this one. And it didn't start out strong, and I'm going to tell you that story. And that is making sure that all of my kids love good stories. And I've learned now that I have kids going into middle school that if you do that one thing, then you did a lot right. Because they can learn so much through books, and you can set them off on their own journeys to devour good literature. And if you put the feast of good literature in front of them, they're going to go beyond you. They're going to go beyond what you're teaching in your homeschool. I forgot my timer, so who can help me and do this when I have 10 minutes? If I get up, I'm never going to get back in this position. Can you bring me the timer, Randy? Thanks. And now I just got a head start. Okay. This is all a lot harder than you may think. Just letting you know. But I love y'all, so I'm doing this. Also, I was saying, we should do hard things. This is actually a challenge for me, and I feel like it's important that we do hard things in our life and say yes to things that kind of scare us, because it's keeps you awake in life. If I can do hard things, I have more confidence now because I did this thing. So thanks for supporting and being here on this crazy journey of doing something hard. So it's not just that they love to read, but what I realized, it's that they crave, and they crave good, rich stories. So it's not just oh, my kids will devour books if the books aren't of high quality, and I'll talk about what that even means. You're missing a really good opportunity to give them things that are beautiful and inspiring and true. And so we have this opportunity as homeschool moms to put the best of the best in front of them. So I'm going to talk about my journey with books and what it looks like now and kind of the journey that I'm on, and then just some practical tips of how do we create homes that are filled with good literature and kids that actually want to read good literature. So my story starts when I was a new mom. First of all, I was public school educated, and I was not raised in a home of good books. I actually can't picture one bookshelf in my childhood home. The only time I was really read to was at my grandmother's house. She had some classics and some poetry and stuff, and she would read to us. My parents weren't highly educated. They were hard. My dad's a construction worker. My mom, they got married when my mom was really young. She finished high school, but it was that. This just wasn't the culture of my home. And then I was in public school, and so I did not get introduced to good literature. I mean, if I did, I read the Spark Notes to pass a test. I never read a full novel until I started homeschooling, a novel, good quality literature. Maybe I read Charlotte's Web. I didn't know how to be a good reader. I didn't want to read. I thought reading was for nerds, and I didn't see the value. When I started my journey with homeschooling, I realized this is a big problem, because that's the foundation of every curriculum I pick up. And that's what every seasoned homeschool mom says, is that we need to be readers, and that we need to raise our kids to be readers, and readers are leaders, and all the things. And so my journey starts when I had my first child. You can go to the next slide. My son Titus, when he was born, he had hearing impairment, and we didn't find out till he was nearly 2. He couldn't talk. He wasn't saying anything, and we went down a whole road of series of tests. We found out that he couldn't hear, and so if you can't hear well, you can't talk well. And so he got hearing aids, but he had a lot of sensory dysfunction because of his lack of hearing. And so when you have one sense that's off, you have a lot of other things that are going on. And so he presented autistic, and we did a lot of testing. He wasn't actually autistic, but he was basically very similar to what you would perceive like a 2-year-old that was autistic, because his senses were off, and he needed to go through a lot of therapy for sensory-related things. And because of that, the boy couldn't sit still, and he was always making loud noises. He was crashing into things. His body was off balance because of his equilibrium, so he would want to run into walls to feel it. He would want to crash all the toys and dump the toys. He got kicked out of the church nursery. So this is my first child, right? I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Especially before I found out that he had hearing loss, and there was a lot there. So I'm a new mom, and I'm like, I want to be a homeschool mom, and I had already had a career in nannying and homeschooling before I became a mom. If you don't know that part of my story, I got hired as a nanny, and they asked me to homeschool their child, and I didn't have kids, and I'm like, excuse me? They're like, yeah, we'll send you to conferences. So I became a homeschool mom before I was a mom, and I ended up homeschooling that child for 3 years, and that was kind of like God paving the way, because that child was autistic. And I don't ever share that publicly, because he's, a person out in the world now and doesn't want that information all over the internet, and that's fine. But here I can tell you that my first experience homeschooling was a very special needs child, and then the Lord gave me my Titus and paved the way. And so I had these things to work through with Titus. So I knew that books were going to be important in our life, and so I was like, I'm a new mom, and I'm going to go to the library once a week, because that's what cute new moms do, right? So we're going to go to the library. Oh my gosh. This child would not sit for story time, and he would scream, I hate the library. I'm like, I'm a homeschool mom. This is not okay. And he did not want anything to do with books because it made him have to sit still, and he couldn't sit still. And I just thought I was failing, at all the things important in life. And you know how it feels when you're a first-time mom. And so I would cry. I had a baby, too, at this time. When Titus was 2, I had a 6-month-old. So I'm, wearing a 6-month-old, have a 2-year-old, I'm taking them out of story time week after week because he doesn't want to sit still, and he's making a scene, and nobody understands his differences, so it's just everybody's looking at me. And I just had this resolve. He got his hearing aids around 2, and I just had this resolve in me that I was going to make this boy love books. And I'm a very goal-driven human being, and at the time I had no career. So I was like, my life goal is to make this child love books, and we're going to sit in that story time one day. And so I started researching, how do I make my child want to read, and how do I make him want to sit with me, and how do I work on these things? And obviously a lot of those things were part of his therapies and working with him, but it also was a lot of intentional things that I did to create that atmosphere in our home and make it a really big priority in our home to make him love books. And I learned early on that if you start young, it's not a battle. And they're going to love reading, and they're going to love books, and when you introduce them to new stories, they're going to get excited. And if you want to succeed in homeschooling, I honestly can say, I think this is probably the number one thing. If you want to succeed in, the academic side of homeschooling, would be to make sure your home is a literature-rich home. And not only is it going to make your children succeed academically, but it's actually going to be easier on you. Because I was saying to my friends earlier at breakfast, they're my friends now, my breakfast table people, that my Titus, now that he's 12, it's if I want him to learn something, and I'm swimming in new children trying to teach them to read, and a business thing that's happening, and a whole thing, because our lives are full of lots of things, I can just give him a big stack of literature about a topic. That child's going to self-educate because he loves to read. He's interested in learning. He thinks books are fun and interesting and great, and not, what my perspective of reading was when I was young, was that's for nerds, or that's for, only for assignments. But when they love to read for pleasure, we're giving them the world. So I started doing a lot of things I'm going to tell you that today, and I'm just going to tell you like the end result. So in this picture where Titus has Frog and Toad, I gave it to him for Christmas because he had been listening to the audiobook, so I got him the actual book for Christmas. And that Christmas, he was 3.5. His birthday's in April, so if he turned 3 in April and he got that book that year, this is in January, I took him to a coffee shop and the boy read the whole book out loud to me at 3.5. Now, all my children didn't read that early, and I did not use a curriculum to teach him to read. I think because of his hearing impairment, his visual sense was really strong, and when I would read to him, I would track with my finger, and then we would use a lot of audiobooks that we had the book with it, and he just soaked it up. And it was almost like what you would give a child that needs to always have a sensory input. You'd like, a lot of people will just give them screens. It was almost like, well, I'm not doing that, so I'm going to do audiobooks and with a book in hand. And he taught himself how to read by 3.5. And in the other picture, by the time he was 6, in that first slide, by the time he was 6, he wanted a book birthday party, and he asked if he could have it at the library. And so I literally asked the library if we could host his birthday party there, and they said they don't do that. So I did a whole Piggy and Gerald themed birthday party. That was in the other picture. And all he wanted for his birthday was Piggy and Gerald books. He wanted the entire series, and you can see in the top picture. So by the time he was 6, he went from hating books and screaming, "I hate the library," to reading by the time he was 3.5, having and wanting a book-themed birthday party. And I say all of that not to pat myself on the back, but to tell you, if you're feeling discouraged, that with some intention, it's possible to turn a child into a book lover. When I tell him those things now, he's kind of like shocked that he ever didn't like books, because now if you ask Titus what he wants to be when he grows up, and this has been 4 or 5 years, he wants to be an author, and he wants to be an audiobook narrator. He already writes novels, and he writes comic books, and he reads a whole genre of literature. He still has a lot of quirks, and one of his quirks is collecting things. And so currently he collects Who Was books. I don't know if any of your kids are into those. His goal is to have 100 by Christmas. He has 72. He could tell you all the titles without looking at his box. He has them alphabetized. And he just got a bunch of them for his birthday in April. And so my 5-year-old daughter got him a Who Was book bin, because she's my organizer. You guys know too much about my children today. So he had him in like multiple boxes, and because he's who he is, he has to take them everywhere. So he brings them in the car when we drive 10 minutes up the street. And you pick your battles with certain children. So at the last stack, he has his Who Was, that's some of the ones he got for his birthday in April. But he's a book collector. He reads big novels. He reads what we call Sometimes Food. And I'm going to talk about that today. But Sometimes Food was from an Elmo show where they're like, it's about healthy food and junk food. And he's like, we eat apples, and that's an anytime food. But, when you eat candy, that's a sometimes food. So we use that in our house a lot with literature, where it's like, we have our anytime food, which is like good quality living books, and then we have our sometimes food, which is like, it's okay if you want to read like a comic book or something that's less literature, So he reads all sorts of things, and I'm not a stickler, but I do think that when you put the good stuff in front of them, that they get an appetite for it, and it grows. So these things are true for my other children that aren't that specific story with Titus. My daughter Josie, she loves to read as well. She reads other things. They all think books are cool. Thankfully, we have a community of kids that think books are cool, and they talk about books, and they play books, and books are a huge part of my children's life outside of school. It's their life. And so it's not just what happened with him, but what I'm going to share with you today are some of the things that I did intentionally to get us to this point, and things that I'm continuing to do with my little kids who still haven't quite caught the bug of being obsessed with books, but I feel it coming. So the first thing would be to just fill your home with living books. And who's familiar with that term, living books? Okay, so I'm going to explain that if you don't know what I'm talking about. But when we designed our home, like I shared that we built a house, we created spaces intentionally around the house for books. So every kid's room has a bookshelf behind their bed where it's like one of those little like frame holders, but it's for books. So they both have bunk beds, girls and boys, and so each kid has one of those. They have a basket also in their room if there's overflow. And then at the top of our stairs, we have a built-in library so that they can sit in the window seat or on a beanbag and they can, books there. And then in our living room, multiple places where there's baskets, and then on our porch there's baskets, and then in our bonus room there's baskets or bookshelves. And so the idea is to intentionally create spaces where when there's dead time between things, or when your kids are looking for something to do, there are places where they can sit and they can read, and then freshening up those baskets, being intentional. As the mom, I feel like our job is not to cram all this information into our children, but to create an environment and invite them into it. And so part of that environment is to have good books at their fingertips. Make going to the library a part of your routine. And if you're frustrated with the content at the library like I am, then utilize putting books on hold. And so the best that you can in your system. I know that we live on the border of North and South Carolina, so I did my research and found out that in South Carolina, you can get a book from anywhere in all of South Carolina, and they'll send it to your library. And so even though my library is like really, really small in South Carolina, and you'd think like, oh, there's no options here. If you show up and, we don't go browse the library very much at all because the content's not great. But I can put loads of books on hold and have them for me, on an app, and have them there for me, and go pick up my good quality books. So it takes work on our part to do this research. I live in North Carolina, but I go over the border to go to South Carolina because they have that program. North Carolina has a decent amount, so I actually have a library card at both. It's very hard to keep them separate. Thankfully, they have like blue and white tags. So just being intentional with, and then when you do have littler kids, I think making the library a part of your routine and having them go in and pick out books. It's a little safer, I think, when you have littler kids to look through picture books and, of course, pre-read, because you just never know what kind of content they're going to have in them. But making that part of our life, because I feel like it was something that, I think the main idea here is making books a big deal. When you make stories and books a big deal in your house, something that's fun, celebrated, something you connect over, they're going to continue to love it and want it and crave it. Teaching your kids to be book hunters. So this has been a really fun part of our family culture. I'm a thrifter and an antiquer and old bookstore person, and so having book lists that are printed all the time and taking your kids on that journey, going to old bookstores, big bookstores that are used, and having your big kids that be a hobby of theirs, have that be something you do together, that they learn how to hunt for a good book, how to hunt for good quality literature, and becoming an expert at finding living books. This takes years of practice if you're new to this, and I'm going to talk about what a living book is after this, but minimizing the twaddle is the opposite of a living book. So minimizing the sometimes food in your home so they're not reaching for it. I would say, our book is probably filled with 5%, 95%. And even when we go to the library, it's same with junk food, right? You want your kids to crave and want the healthy food. And then when you have the Oreo or the Pop-Tart Pinnacle, then it's this is a really big treat. But what happens is over time, just like adult, I don't know about you, but I don't crave a Pop-Tart. I actually crave protein and salads, and I need a steak. I want healthy food that's good, that supports my body. And so that's the idea for children, is that over time, they're going to be oh, I'm not really interested in that book because it doesn't have the rich language. They won't verbalize that necessarily. But over time, they're going to be that was boring. I want to reach for the good book. Become an expert at finding living books. I want to go back to that for a second. The way that you do that is not just recognizing what makes a living book, but for me, at the beginning, it was relying on people who've gone before me. And so when I first started out trying to figure this whole thing out, because I hadn't been exposed to good books, I relied on bloggers and publishers and things who had free book lists. So some of them I'll list so you can write it down is Ambleside Online, which is a whole free Charlotte Mason curriculum. But I don't use their curriculum and I don't follow it to a T, but I do rely on their book lists because I trust their vision and their heart. And so I go every year onto Ambleside Online, or AO, I think it's amblesideonline.com. and I look at their book lists of what they're doing in their curriculum or even in their free reads. So right now I have a 6th grader, so I'm going to go on to like their year 7, and I'm going to, stock up on all the free reads for grade 7 and have it in our mom's library, which I'll talk to you about in a sec, or just have them around the house. And then, of course, Who Knows Read Aloud Revival. Gotta love Read Aloud Revival. She always has really good book lists. And then my website, I have a ton of book lists. They're not by grade, they're more by themes. So we have seasonal book lists and holiday book lists. I have a book list specifically for young kids. So any kind, and that's treehouseschoolhouse.com. Anybody that you trust, like even Sunlight Curriculum, I don't use their curriculum, but I look at their book lists. So finding curriculum companies that will give out their book lists, I'm giving you like a secret here, and using their book list in your home. And then once you start getting familiar with what a living book is, then you'll be able to find them. And then also when you find an author you love, then you go down that rabbit trail of more books from that author. And then over time, it becomes your culture, and it becomes like easy. And then, okay, so now I'm going to talk to you specifically about living books. I'm going to read you a couple quotes. The first one's from Charlotte Mason. "One more thing is of vital importance. Children must have books, living books. The best are not too good for them. Anything less than the best is not good enough, and if it is needful to exercise economy, let go of everything that belongs to soft and luxurious living before letting go of the duty of supplying the books and the frequent changes of books, which are necessary for the constant stimulation of the child's intellectual life." And so what that says to me is like, you can spend money on books. You can tell your husband I said that. It's important. Like, it's a super important thing to have in our homes. And the constant changing of books, which thank you for the library, right? Because then it's like we can always change. But then if you have multiple children, building your home library is probably the best homeschool resource you could ever buy. Because when I buy books for my oldest child that are good quality literature, and they're sitting on my bookshelf, not only will he read them again, but then my next child, it is so worth it. It is so worth the investment, and then keeping them fresh. And then Karen Glass is kind of the expert in narration, and I'm going to talk about narration in a little bit, but we are not reading books merely to check off a list or to be able to say that we have read them. We are reading to grow as persons, to know more that we may understand more, and ultimately it is to be hoped to act according to our greater wisdom. So if we're giving them books that are filled with inspiring stories and heroes and things that are going to challenge their character, then they're going to hopefully become like the characters in the book. So it actually really matters what's in front of them. Earlier we talked about the gift of time and how much time we're spending with them. If they're spending a big portion of their time reading, it really matters what they're reading, because those things that they're reading about are going to be produced in their life. Just like if they watch a lot of TV, they're going to become like the characters. I seriously see it with literature. It's like when they read about these, however the children treat each other, or how they speak to their parents, or the things that they care about, they become like what they read and what they watch. So if I had to define a living book, I have to stand up. My feet are falling asleep. If I had to define a living book, there's not actually like a definition out there necessarily. So this is one that I kind of formed over the years. So typically a living book, the author has firsthand experience or a passion about the subject. So it's not just a textbook writer being told you need to write a book about beetles, and so they just like AI the whole book about beetles. That would be how it is now. It's a person who's maybe been one who's studied beetles, and so they care, or they have like a backstory and they have a passion. So the story itself is either something they've lived, they've seen, or maybe they just have a passion for the subject in general. And so you're not just reading facts. The book is often written in story form, so that's why we do a lot of learning through literature. So when my children acted out Clara Barton because they read about the Civil War and they read it in the context of a story, they're never going to forget who Clara Barton was, because it was in literature, in a story they connected to, with characters they connected to, in a time frame where they heard about the war. But if I just put a worksheet in front of them about the facts of the Civil War and then fill in the blanks, What are they? They don't care. Number one, they're going to fight me. And number two, they're never going to remember it, right? And that's how I was educated. Like, I was educated through a Civil War textbook, so now I'm relearning everything because nothing stuck with me. And so my hope is not to do that with my kids, right? So with living books, it gets in them. The story lingers with you, so not just your children, but you. How can I stand up here and still talk about Summer of the Monkeys passionately? Because when I read it, I loved it, I learned, and it, touched me. And that's so many books that we've read. And so it's not something you're dreading because you love it. You think about it long after you finish reading, and you'll see that in your kids. When they play the story later, you know that was a living book. When they make puppets for fun and they, act out the story, when they have inside jokes for 6 months later about the book, that's a living book. So you can probably start thinking about books you've read to your children and how that's happened. Y'all are doing it. You're doing the living books. It engages your imagination. When you're reading aloud this book, they can picture it. If you're just reading a monotone thing about the Civil War, they're not going to picture it. But if you're in the story and it has emotion, it moves you to emotions. I cry. We were talking about that. How many books I've cried. I feel like my kids make fun of me because who cries during read-alouds? I've cried during so many read-alouds. I always get choked up, and my 10-year-old daughter does too, but then my 12-year-old's like, oh my gosh, because he's a boy. And he's like, here we go again, Mom, get the tissues. But if a book is going to evoke you to emotion, then it's likely a living book. So I'm going to read you 2 quick excerpts on bees. One is a textbook, and one is a short story, and in both of them, you're going to learn the same information, but you're going to see the difference. Bees are remarkable creatures belonging to the order Hymenoptera and are closely related to ants and wasps. They play a crucial role in ecosystems as pollinators. Specifically, the honeybee is renowned for its efficiency in pollination, significantly aiding in the production of fruits and vegetables. Bee colonies are complex social structures consisting of a single queen, numerous female worker bees, and male drones. The queen's primary role is reproduction, while workers maintain the hive, gather nectar, and produce honey. Drones exist solely to mate with a new queen. Bees communicate through the waggle dance, a movement pattern used by worker bees to inform others of the location of the food sources. The angle and duration of the dance convey directional information relative to the sun. Could any of you tell me much of what I read? No. So if you read something like that and you expect your child to remember, engage, narrate, you're kind of setting them up for failure. But how about this? In the meadow behind her grandmother's house, Emma watched the bees hop from blossom to blossom. She was fascinated by their gentle buzz and diligent work. Grandma always said bees were nature's little farmers, vital to gardens' bounty. Did you know, Grandma began one morning as they sipped their tea on the porch, that a single bee can pollinate thousands of flowers in a day? Emma nodded, remembering how Grandma had explained the waggle dance, which bees used to tell each other where the best flowers were. One afternoon, while wandering closer to the hives, Emma saw a bee perform its dance, its little body wiggling in precise patterns, and she imagined the bee saying, "I found the juiciest blooms just a short flight away." Curious, Emma asked, "What happens to the honey they make, Grandma?" Their worker bees evaporate the water from nectar, transforming it into honey, and seal it in the honeycombs. It's their winter food, Grandma explained. By doing their work, bees help our apple trees grow and make sure that we have plenty of berries to make pie in the summer. Every visit to Grandma's house became an opportunity to learn more about these insects. Emma watched their tireless routines, gaining an appreciation for the relationships in nature. And as she learned, she realized her role, too, to protect and nurture the garden, ensuring that the bees had plenty of flowers to dance about. So that's the difference. And so we are looking for stories, we are looking for books that inspire and that make us remember and help our children remember. Okay, so the next thing I do, and I already touched on this, is making sure that you are prioritizing reading aloud when they're young, because when you start young, you're starting their appetite. It's just like you can't give your kid junk food and then when they turn 10, be like, we're eating healthy now. They're going to fight you. So you start young, getting them, having that appetite. And if you feel like it's too late, you can always start with baby steps. I do think it's harder when you start later. So the younger you can start introducing them to living books and having less of the junk food, then it's going to be a little easier for you. So number one is choose living books, and these are books that inspire, like I said, books that have heroes, books that have good character. And this one specifically, if you have children that are preschool, kindergarten age, or younger, I have a free book list on my website, and out at my table I have a card where there's a QR where it goes straight to my website, and then you can search for this. It's called 100 Living Books for the Early Years. And it's literally 100 book titles. So take that, put those books on hold at your library, and that'll get you started. Number two is to put it into your daily rhythm. So when I only had preschoolers, this was very easy, right? Like your whole day can be books. I read hours a day. I had certain times of the day. We'd read in the morning during breakfast, and then we'd read over lunch. And now I have big kids too, and so it's a lot harder. But one of the things that we do now is we call it milk and coffee hour. And about one time a day during the school week, we get a big stack of books from my living book, or like I grab a basket wherever I have them all over the house, and I make my latte, and I give them cups of milk, and we have lids, and it's like our milk and coffee hour time. And me and my 5 and my 6-year-old, we've been doing this for probably 3 years, we go cuddle up somewhere, and we have our milk and our coffee, and I read them books. And then if you feel like your little kids would never sit for an hour, that took time. It might have been one book. It might have been just until the milk spilled. You just start small. And so snacks and quiet toys to keep hands busy. Who does this when you read aloud, that you have stuff? Okay, I want to see if you could shout out some of the things that you use. Legos, magnet blocks, coloring, wiki sticks are a good one. What else? Dinosaurs? Okay, toy dinosaurs. So I would say that it depends on the kid on that one. You must have calm kids. Is that true? If my kids, the thing that I've learned is I've had to actually give them ownership and say, do you think you can play with this and keep it quiet and let them choose? Because if I give my boys action figures, that is not happening. They're not listening at all. They're rah, 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 or dinosaurs for my kids. So that's really cool and very impressive. What? Okay, see? I feel like my kid could maybe do a car. Or I'll be like, ooh, let's do clay, because that's not loud. Next thing you know, they formed a dinosaur. And then they're fighting, and I'm like, listen. So even my older kids still do stuff with their hands all the time when I read aloud. And I just kind of give them ownership, like, do you think you can focus on the story? If not, let's choose something else. And so the next thing is practice play narration. If you're not familiar with this, what this essentially is, if you'll go to the next slide, I'm going to show you. Oops, where's that one? Oh, I'm sorry. That's in my. Go back. I'm sorry. The play narration pictures are in my. I'm going to talk about that in the earlier. So I'll just share it really quick. Is that go back one more? You love me. Okay. Play narration is essentially reading a book aloud to your children and then acting the book out. So you're not asking them to tell you back the story yet. They're 3, 4, 5. But in those early years, you're asking them, or you're encouraging them, inviting them to play the story. So that could be a number of things. That could be giving them costumes, or literally like a sheet or whatever, and having them act out the story. It could be giving them little toys and having them act out the story with the toys. It could be doing a puppet show. It could be doing no props at all. It's just like, we're reading Blueberries for Sal, and I'm Mama Bear. What did Baby Bear do? Okay, so then you're encouraging the child to tell back the story through play. And this sets them up for success and sets them up for narration for when they're older. And I will talk more specifically about tools for that if you come to the early years one, if you have little kiddos. Make stories a big deal and a celebration. So any way that you can think of to make books a part of your home in such a big, exciting way, that's what you want to do. So that's kind of the point of all of this. And you might have more creative ideas than I have. Okay, so next is schedule in times for reading aloud daily. This sounds obvious as homeschool moms. It's like, yeah, we do that. But I don't know about you, when my seasons get busy or when I feel like there are certain times of the year where things start to fall by the wayside. Don't let reading aloud fall. If you have to put most of your schoolwork aside for the summer, or you plan to, or whatever it is, if you can at all, even gather for 30 minutes and read aloud to your children of all ages, but especially to the younger children who are gaining that appetite for good books, keep that one in your schedule. So multiple ways that we do this, all together as a family, like I shared this morning during lunch, or even at night with my husband. So he'll read like Narnia or something with voices and all the things. Getting your older kids to read to your younger kids, not just like, oh, that sometimes happens. Make it part of their school. So in this picture, that's Josie reading to my little two the best of the best books, and I've taught her to use her finger to track the words so that they're getting used to that too, because as they're starting to develop wanting to read, they're going to learn left to right. They're going to start sounding out things without you doing a phonics lesson. So I have it as part of my big kids' school that they need to read to the kids, read 2 or 3 books to one of the little kids. During meals, before bedtime, and then choosing literature-based curriculum. If this is something that's really important to you and you want to have a literature-rich home, it's an option to choose curriculum that's the heart, because then it's going to be easy and you're going to have book lists built into your school rhythms and you're going to be aligning with that. If you basically have a workbook for every subject for every kid, they're going to be separated and you might fit in a read aloud, but they're going to be busy doing so much workbook stuff that you're not going to have time to create that culture. So if that's important to you, that's something that you can do. Next would be, we're going to talk about practicing narration. So narrating is not the work of a parrot, but of absorbing into oneself the beautiful thought from the book, making it one's own, and then giving it forth again with just that little touch that comes from one's own mind. So real quick, narration is basically the art of telling back. When they're little, they start with play narration, so that's playing the story like I shared. Then it moves on when they're a little bit older. For my kids, we start around age 6 or 7, where when I read a book or I read a short part of the book, I read a paragraph, depending on the kid's level, then I say, tell me what happened in the story. And one tip for you, if you have a kid that will say, you already know, you read it to me. Who has a kid that would maybe say that? Okay, so what I did at first with that is I would say, we're all going to bring a stuffed animal to story time when they're like 6 and you're just starting. And we're going to put the stuffy under our chair. They're not here when I'm reading. And then I'll be like, okay, get your dinosaur out. The dinosaur did not hear the story. Or I'll be like, pretend to be the dinosaur and be like, I didn't get to hear the story. Will you tell me the story? And so then they're narrating to the dinosaur. They're not telling me. Or if you have an older kid and you're trying to put this into practice, don't call it narration. Just like the other day when Josie told me the whole book while we were walking. Just make it a part of your life, like at dinner time. Tell Daddy what we read today. Wasn't it so good? What did we read today? So as they get more comfortable, they'll know this is part of our homeschooling. We narrate, we tell back. And then as they get older, the written narration that's the next phase. As they get older, they write down what you read to them and even what they read on their own. Then you have them write back down. And what this is doing is developing language skills, sequencing. There's so much that happens through narration. I could give a whole talk on narration. I won't. But if you're really interested in this topic, you're going to want to read the book Know and Tell by Karen Glass. We have a fan in the back. That's great. I'm glad that you agree. Know and Tell by Karen Glass. That really helped me understand this whole concept. Okay, next would be to rotate books with holidays and seasons. So my website, like I said, we have free lists for all the holidays that you can think of pretty much. And for the season, so we'll have a whole spring, these are picture books. So spring picture books, summer, fall, winter. And the idea with this is just like you celebrate a holiday in your home, right? And it's all exciting and you start getting out the decor and you start doing all these traditions. Make books a part of your traditions. So reading the same Christmas books, revisiting the ones that evoke your emotion every year after year. And, I remember that one. Oh, I can't wait to read that one. And kids get so excited. So you're making books a big deal. You're making this a fun thing in your home. Cook or craft from themes in the books to make the books come to life and make the books a memorable part of your life and a thing that your kids are going to have inside jokes about and they're going to connect over. Offer books that align with your child's reading level and interest. Nothing's more frustrating to a child than being told to read books or just offered all books that they can't read. So be a student of your student, be a student of your child to learn their interests, to learn their level, and it's like make it your full-time job, it feels like, to keep up with your kids' like book life. I feel like it's a huge part of my whole job as a homeschool mom is to keep up with my kids' book life. So my daughter's into mystery novels, so I'm researching, like wholesome, because that's a whole thing we have to do as Christian homeschool moms, wholesome mystery novels. So you're going to become familiar with the people who put out good book lists. You're going to become familiar with the places you can dig and find these books. Ask your friends, it's a job, but it's important. And if this is the primary thing you do for their academic life, make it a part of your job, is to research their level and keep up with them, and if you're kind of new at this, I remember needing someone to tell me that a reading level is not the same as a listening level. So a child's reading level is going to be lower than what they can listen to. So if you can read your child Narnia, that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to read Narnia. And you want to have both. You want to have books that are more advanced than their reading level to read aloud, but then you're going to want to have books on their reading level for them to read independently. Does that make sense? And having both, they're going to grow their appetite for quality literature if you're reading them advanced novels, at the same time growing their reading level if they're reading on their level. And then like in this picture, my daughter's reading Nancy Drew. She's into that. My boy's into Green Ember right now in the Wingfeather saga. Anybody's boys into those? And then my little guy, he's a later reader, so they're not all the same, because Huck he's 6.5, and he's just moving beyond Bob books. So every kid's different. Don't pressure them. Let them read at their own pace. You want it to be fun. You want it to be full of joy. It does not matter if they read at 3.5 or 6. It does not matter. What matters is that they love it. And if that is getting squashed, then I feel like that's when you're missing it. I'm going to try to wrap up. So choose literature-based curriculum. So if you're interested in this life, I think I already touched on this. So some of the ones that I like that are literature-based are Sunlight, Beautiful Feet books, 5 in a Row, Treehouse Schoolhouse. And then the next one would be join or start a book club. So this has been one of the most fun parts of our homeschool life. And I shared earlier about Summer of the Monkeys. At the end of that whole study that we did in our home, you could join up and with friends do a book club. So this one specifically I'm going to share about. What you do is you read a chapter book within the same time frame as friends. You gather to celebrate the finishing of the book. You do themed snacks. You do collaborative projects or activities. And then each kid has opportunities to present what they've learned in the book. So if you quickly go to the next slide, I'll make this quick, but we did the book, The Sign of the Beaver, so I just wanted to show you an example. This book is all about Native Americans and the 18th century Maine, and it's basically two kids from different cultures becoming friends and going through a lot of trials together. And so at our book club, we ate food themed to the story. We made cornbread. We had popcorn because the corn was a huge part of it, nuts and seeds, dried meat. We made paper mache wigwams in pairs, so there's a lot of like collaborative work that can happen when you do a book club. Pretzel log cabins. We did a scavenger hunt in the woods where they had to make like Native American signs with sticks that we heard in the book. And then in the bottom picture, Titus is giving a presentation of one of his notebook pages that he did at home about the book. So it's giving them those public speaking skills. And I think book clubs we've been doing since my kids were preschool. I mean, like our whole homeschooling journey, because it's celebrating books. And it's just like if you'd have a birthday. It feels like a birthday party. Like when we have a book club meetup, it's like we decorate for it. We make it a big deal. We make it something the kids are excited about. And then the last thing, more recently, something that we've recently done is my kids have like outgrown, I cannot keep up with their reading. Something that I've just recently tried is book dates, where my older children read from Mom's Library, which basically is a curated collection of books that they would maybe not grab. So I'm going to put books in there that are maybe more classic literature that maybe they wouldn't get into if I didn't try to like push it on them, or like maybe just something they just wouldn't read, but it's something off of one of those book lists that I want them to try. And I put it in Mom's Library, and at all times, my big kids, ages 10 and 12, have to read something from Mom's Library during our school time. So they read all day long, but during school, they have to read a couple chapters, 1 or 2 chapters from their book from Mom's Library. And it might take them a few chapters to get into it, But then once they're finished with their book, we go on a date, just me and them. We usually walk up to the coffee shop or something, and we split a cinnamon roll, and we basically go on a special one-on-one where they give me a summary, so they're narrating without knowing it, and I'm asking them questions, and I just pull up some questions online if I haven't read the book, but I trust the book, right? And so I'm asking them questions. They're basically doing an oral book report, and we just chat, and it's almost like this connection time that we can continue to chat over books. And I feel like as they grow into being high schoolers and I'm not reading all their books aloud anymore, this is going to be a tool in my tool belt to continue to connect over books. And so I did it. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I'm around, and you guys can ask me any questions. We're also going to do Q&A later. Feel free to go on my website and grab a free book list. They're everywhere on there, and you can talk to me too at the table, or just pull me aside anytime today if you have questions.
Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to head into session 4. This is our last session for the day. If you chose to go and listen to the teens with Randy Joe, we're going to take you upstairs to a separate room. So what we're going to do is give you a few minutes if you need to use the restroom, grab a sip of water, and we've broken down the tables where all the food was and just meet there because it's a little confusing to get to. So we're going to meet over there, and then we'll walk you upstairs in the next 10 minutes, okay? Thank you. Oh, and if you're staying for Lyndsey's early years, then you'll just come back here.